Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to another episode of WJ Live. Thank you so much for joining us. Just in case you didn't hear me 2 seconds ago, this is WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal, where I found out that my co-hosts have terrible taste in music. Speaking of my co-hosts, to my left, I have associate staff writer Michael Austin.
Bohemian Rhapsody is a great song. It's a classic, one of the best of all time.
And person with bad taste in music number 2, Deborah Van Kempen. I am Brian Chai. I am Brian Chai, the deputy managing editor of Features, and we have a whole smorgasbord of topics to get to today, from pancake syrup to fact-checking the fact-checkers. I'm going to go and get us kicked off, guys. So today, the well-known pancake syrup, Aunt Jemima, changed their name to the much... I don't know how to describe it, dumber sounding, Pearl Milling Company. To be fair to them, this was in the works for a while because they had decided that Aunt Jemima was a racist stereotype. Not sure how pancake syrup can be racist, but that's neither here nor there. One thing that really bugged me about this name change is that the character of Aunt Jemima, just to give a quick history lesson, was originally portrayed by a woman, Nancy Green. She debuted as the first Aunt Jemima model at the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition, which is essentially a world fair, which we don't really do anymore. And she was also historic for being the first kind of living trademark of the advertising world. So history. She is an important figure, and it does sort of feel like we're just kind of erasing that. We're dismissing it because we must appeal to the woke mob. And, you know, it pains me to say this. This is hardly a unique situation. We've seen this across everything. Uncle Ben's Rice, Land O'Lakes Butter, sports teams from, basically any team that has any sort of connotation to Native Americans, Redskins, Indians, Braves. They're all kind of under scrutiny. And it's just really depressing to see. And especially when, the replacement names for some of these things, like Pearl Milling Company. Like I read up a bit on it, and I guess that's where they first kind of invented the syrup. That's where they milled the oats and stuff. But so I guess there's some historical significance, but I mean, even then you have, the Washington Redskins, the NFL team, they're now the Washington football team, which is a accurate name, I guess. It blows my mind to see this sort of retconning, this erasing of history to appease what I feel like is basically just a very vocal minority in 2021. These are the people that yell the loudest on Twitter, on Facebook. But to appease those people, these giant entities with all sorts of storied and fascinating histories are just saying, we'll get rid of all that to appease people in 2021. So, Mike, I'll kick this over to you first. When does this end? Like, will this ever end? Because I feel like the way we're going at this point, we may as well just kind of stop teaching history.
Yeah, it's only going to end when people are brave enough to stand up to a lot of this woke stuff, and we're starting to hit that point where people are just saying enough is enough. What we need is to get more liberals on our side, on this side of the woke stuff. That's starting to happen. The center is starting to shift towards us, but until that finishes happening, this isn't going to stop. And it's so crazy to me because, the Washington Redskins thing, for example, the vast majority of Native Americans do not find that offensive. It's just white liberals that find it offensive. And, Aunt Jemima, her descendants came out against them removing the image. And it seems like between her and Uncle Ben Rice, like, any depiction of a happy black person wearing historically accurate garb from like the time period around slavery, that's just racist now. Like anytime they do that, it's just racist. And it's absurd. So
yeah, that's a good point. I do want to make a quick statement. I do think I'm not sure the center is moving towards the right so much as the left is just veering
That's
far away from the center as humanly possible.
I should say the center is moving on this side of wokeness. So
Yes.
it's not, they're not joining us, but
Yeah.
they're starting to reject wokeness a little bit.
Yeah, no, I agree with Michael completely. I think that it ends when we wake up and decide to stop glorifying the people that are doing this. I think that America is now full of white liberals who are getting offended for the randomest of reasons and choosing the most absurd hills to die on. And it's just ridiculous. And like, while a lot of these people, a lot of these younger liberals, while a young perspective is very good to have, obviously, as we think here, I think that it's
I'm
essential.
not young, but
Well, you're young at heart.
sure.
But I think it's essential that we have to call a spade a spade. We have to recognize that these are opinions, that these are not absolute truths. These are not facts. These are what some people think should be the case. And I think that we have to be able to recognize that for this to end.
And this kind of ties into, I've been seeing a few stories lately. I think Barry Weiss wrote one, and then another came out in Quillette, which is a great kind of centrist magazine that I really like. Basically just saying that the way this is going to stop is when people start like aggressively pushing back against wokeness in the same way that they aggressively push for everything being racist. And so I think we're starting to see that happen because I'm seeing it in those kind of centrist places. Barry Weiss put it out. So yeah, I think it'll happen.
Yeah, and it is, specifically when you see stuff like, okay, let's take out all like the like products, sports teams, like it's even affecting like actual history where we're seeing schools petitioning, or the white liberals petitioning to rename schools named after George Washington,
Take down statues, all this stuff.
So kind of going off that, Deborah, what are some of the real and tangible dangers and pitfalls of this rewriting of history that is, like you very accurately pointed out, it's not just the rewriting of history isn't just pushed, it's celebrated at this point.
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest dangers that we could see in the future is that the censorship is going to extend into the education system. And I think that it's already started to kind of do that. I think, we have these books that are being canceled, like Catcher in the Rye and To Kill a Mockingbird and stuff. And books that I personally really loved reading in school, and books that I thought were very helpful
Great
to my
Gatsby.
education. Yeah,
Canceling that one too.
Great Gatsby. And it's all based on the opinions of a group of people that think that they know what they're doing by choosing to what they think is advocating for minority groups. And it's very sad that this one smallish group of people is making such a big impact that this could potentially be the future of American education.
And what that usually goes to is it's a small group of elite white liberals making decisions for large groups of ethnic minorities.
Yep.
Yeah, it's sad to think about. I've got a kid on the way, and I'm really dreading the day where he comes home with, his history homework assignment. And instead of George Washington, who was a slave owner, it just says, President number one. It's just some sort of, erasure of. Yeah, it's just, that's where we're headed. Like the way this is going. Mike, what are some real dangers of all this nonsense?
Well, it's the erasing the history, like we've said, is a big one. I mean, the woman that did portray Aunt Jemima, like, there's a great story of how she got that job
Former
and everything.
slave turned activist.
Yeah. And her story is just gone now. Like, if it could just be erased forever. When, maybe a much better initiative that they could have done is sharing more of that story, realizing that this is an anti-slavery story of her coming out of this. So yeah, it's erasing history. It's not only erasing history, it's rewriting it as, in some ways, they rewrite it as, we were always racist and then all of a sudden we were good. And in other ways, by taking away stuff like this, we're not learning about those mistakes, about the actual racism that did happen, when we're not able to examine it in a fair way.
Yeah.
So.
If we can't remember our past, how are we ever going to learn from our mistakes?
Right.
How are we ever going to teach our children to be better in the future?
Well, I just don't make mistakes, so that's how I.
Your kid will be set.
Do that too.
Yeah. And it's interesting you brought that up about sort of this disdain for American history, but it's not just history these days. As much as it pains me to kick this over to you, Deborah, because you're about to denigrate my favorite sports team of all time.
I am.
Sports teams in particular seem to have a genuine distaste for America in its present.
Yep. Yeah, so just yesterday, we saw the owner of the Dallas Mavericks. His name is Mark Cuban, and he announced Tuesday night that his team would no longer be playing the national anthem before basketball games in the NBA. And he said that he made that decision in November and that he stood by it even now. And then we actually saw the White House commented on this. The Biden administration's own Jen Psaki commented on it and basically said that, well, I'll read to you her quote. She said, "He'd," meaning Biden, "also say that, of course, that part of the pride in our country means recognizing moments where we as a country haven't lived up to our highest ideals, which is often, and at times when people are speaking to when they take action at sporting events." So the White House basically told reporters that part of pride in your country is recognizing when your country is in the wrong, which, to some extent I'd agree with, but I don't believe this is one of those cases. Anyways.
Well, and it's like you said, how can you recognize the wrong if you're just going to rewrite the wrong?
Right.
Well,
Right.
they're not. This isn't about recognizing the wrong. They're just saying that it's only wrong.
Exactly.
Like they're taking away all pride.
That's a good point.
So, yeah.
Exactly. So then after we heard about that, actually another development happened today where the NBA released an official statement, and we actually have that in a Twitter post, if we can put that up on the screen. Yeah, so statement from NBA Chief Communications Officer Mike Bass on the league's rile on playing the national anthem. With NBA teams now in the process of welcoming fans back into their arenas, all teams will play the national anthem in keeping with longstanding league policy. So this was a statement from the NBA, and then after that, we also have another tweet that shows the owner's response to the New York Times. Mavericks owner Mark Cuban to New York Times Sports on the league's decision to mandate the playing of the national anthem before games. "We are good with it." And that was it. So basically, the NBA just kind of quashed this idea that they're not going to be playing the national anthem before games, which, I'm a big fan of. But I did want to ask you kind of about the implications that even the thought of possibly doing that brings. So my first question, and I'll kick it off to you, Michael, first.
Sure. Yeah.
How did we get to this point where this feeling of shame for America is starting to become something that is celebrated?
It's been something that's been happening for a while. When it comes to the shame for America, I really think another sports incident, Colin Kaepernick, when he started kneeling, that really started making people realize, that really started this movement of we need to denigrate the entire history of America because it's always been awful and it's never been good for all of us, which is just, we have had many mistakes and we do need to realize that, but to just disparage the entire country, to disparage the national anthem, the American flag.
Yeah.
Of course, they're tearing apart our unity. Of course, this is breaking us off into different sects. It's just making things worse. And I do have to also add that probably the most disturbing part of this story is that the Mavericks suck right now. They're 11-14. Kristaps Porzingis looks like a shell of his former self.
Brian's
Josh Richardson
dying
looks like
internally.
a shell of his former self. They are a mess. They should be one of the top teams in the league, and they're not, and they suck. So, yeah.
Brian, thoughts?
I just had to put that in because Brian is a huge Mavs fan.
I am going to ignore that last comment and actually go back to when you were mentioning Colin Kaepernick. I think it actually probably even goes further back. The first real, I think, kind of flashpoint for this self-loathing of America, I actually think started with former President Barack Obama after the Trayvon Martin, right? That's his name.
Yes.
Trayvon Martin.
Yeah.
After the Trayvon Martin incident where Obama came out and basically, I don't have the quote verbatim, but he said that, that could have been my son or,
and
my kid.
he also said things like racism is in America's DNA. The race relations definitely took a dive under Obama. It wasn't under Trump. It remained steadily bad under Trump, but it was Obama that started it off.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of the flashpoint. From there, it does feel as if things got worse because I think the left's MO, and I'm pretty comfortable saying this, even though I'm not of the far left. The left's MO is to beat people down, just smush them to smithereens, and then build them back up with the sort of falling in line with their beliefs, their common core beliefs. Because most sensible people realize that, yeah, sure, America has faults. I don't think anyone can deny that. It's also the best country in the world. And the only way you can stave off that belief is by just beating them into the ground. And that's what we're seeing.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's you kind of touched on it, that people no longer seem to believe that America is the greatest country in the world. People are comparing us to third world nations and places that actually have real problems of racism. And I won't say that racism isn't a real problem in the United States, because of course it is. But, you know, places where women are still being legally raped by men and different things like this. You know, there are real issues in different nations. In the United States, I would personally say has made a lot of progress in that area, and people just don't seem to realize that. So the second question that I wanted to kind of touch on is that, do we think that social justice activists in the future are going to want to completely change the way that we do things in this nation, are going to want to change the way that we play National Basketball Association games, are going to change the way that we make movies, are going to change the way that people are policed?
I mean, yeah, they already want all of those things. I think that's an interesting question, because it's like whether the mainstream, a big enough chunk of those social justice warriors will want to go that far to change all those things. I think yes, and I think they want to do it piece by piece and step by step. You know, we're going to get to the point where it's, you know, it's wrong to even have sporting events. Like there are plenty of social justice warriors that believe that sports are inherently a, you know, evil thing because they promote like physicality and aggression, which are both.
Or even, I mean, we saw for a while there was a push, and it seems to have mostly died, but there was a push for a while in the NBA where the term owner, like team owner, was under fire.
No, that's officially, they officially call all the owners something else now. Like they don't call them owners anymore.
Oh boy.
You called Mark Cuban an owner.
I am so sorry.
Unbelievable.
I know.
To answer your question, Deborah, I think they've kind of already gotten what they wanted. It's terrible, but you know, I actually have a personal anecdote stemming from going to a Mavericks game once. This was 2 years ago. Me and my wife went to a Mavs game while we were in Texas, and during the playing of the national anthem, there was a good, I would say, 10%, 15% of the audience that didn't stand for the anthem, and this was 2 years ago. You know, and it was jarring to see, because, you know, when you go to all the sporting events I've gone to in my life, it's pretty much 95% or more people standing for the national anthem. And to see even that extra 5-10% that I saw when I went 2 years ago to a game was really jarring. And it's clear that this social justice rhetoric is working. It's working for them, which is probably the worst part of all this.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't think they'll ever get like 40 or 50% of the population to buy into that.
I don't think so.
So their power is always going to be limited, but it is important to note, like people like, you know, Jeff Van Gundy, who's the coach of the New Orleans Pelicans, and Stan
Van Gundy.
Oh, it's Stan Van Gundy. Yeah, sorry, Jeff. They're both social justice warriors, but like Stan was coming out and basically saying, why do we even stand for the national anthem? We don't do it at movies. We don't do it at this place. We shouldn't do it at games. And it's slowly sending the message to everyone that we're not in this together. You guys that like America, we're not in it with you. We're fighting against you. And that's just making things worse and worse. And yeah, I think a lot of this started under Obama, like you said, Brian, and it's just going to continue with rhetoric like this. It's just going to continue to get more divisive and more split.
Yeah. Unpopular opinion coming. I do think some of these conversations on race and race relations in the country, they are very uncomfortable conversations that we need to have as a country.
Yeah.
One of my big issues is yes, I do think it's disrespectful not to stand for the anthem, but one of my biggest issues with these anthem demonstrations or not playing the anthem is that that immediately shifts the conversation. We're no longer talking about race relations. We're talking about the anthem specifically. And I've written many a piece for the Western Journal, shout out the Wild Card, where I talked about Colin Kaepernick and his anthem protests. And I always pointed out criminal justice reform is an uncomfortable conversation worth having. The absolute worst way to start that conversation is by spitting in the eye of someone who loves America. And that's never changed. And I don't think it'll change because slowly but surely, like Michael said, I don't think it'll ever be half the country. I hope not. I don't want my kid to grow up in that kind of America.
There's no way.
But even if it's 15%, 20% of the country, that's a lot of people.
I could see that.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah, and it's starting to get there. And Michael, I know that you wanted to also kind of talk about sports a little bit in your topic.
So Joe Biden's recent executive orders, basically, one of his big initiatives for his presidency, he has stated one of his biggest initiatives is forwarding LGBTQ plus, the alphabet people's rights. And kind of the biggest of those letters is the transgender community right now. The left certainly believes that the new civil rights movement is the transgender civil rights movement, which is wacky to say the least. So Joe Biden put out an executive order on January 20th, his first day in office, that basically it effectively will allow males to participate in girls' sports. We wrote several stories on that, and then this PolitiFact fact check came out saying that statement is false. And their argument for why that statement was false is completely semantical. It doesn't really make any sense, and it's just it's a load of crap, if I can say that on WJ Live.
Dude, Kale's gonna fire you.
Yeah. I was deciding between crap and BS, and I went with crap. So
Stop saying it.
All right. So basically the argument that PolitiFact made was that because the order doesn't specifically say that, okay, all sports teams need to have biological males on them now, that meant that Biden's order did not allow men onto women's sports. But what it does is it's a mandate that all federal agencies have to follow, including the education department. And it says that you must end gender discrimination. And the order itself says that, all children shouldn't have to worry about if they're not going to be allowed to be on a sports team or let into a bathroom. So so this order, whether it specifically says it or not, the end result's going to be the same. It's going to allow males onto girls' sports teams, which is, a huge problem. Obviously we all know why. Men have inherently different biological, physical advantages than women do when it comes to athletics. And just the big part about this for me is just PolitiFact gave that statement a false rating based on that completely horrible logic. And it's one of the best examples of why fact checking is such an erroneous practice. It's such a failed practice that sites like platforms like Facebook and Twitter that have decided to get into. And what this shows is it's essentially just thought policing for the left. And because you almost never see opinions that favor left-wing thinking get these sorts of fact checks and okay, that's kind of misleading or missing information, despite the fact that so many stories on the left nowadays are misleading and they don't have important information in them. And so one thing I was going to ask you guys is how do you think we can fight back against these sort of fact checks? Because it's really important, because when platforms like Facebook and Twitter, they work with these companies like PolitiFact, and they get these totally just false fact checks put out, and it can hamper conservative voices on these platforms. And when we try to make new platforms like Parler, that doesn't seem to work out either. So how do you think we're going to fight back against these fact checks? Is it going to be through just doing our best to put the truth out there, or are there going to be other measures we're going to need to take?
I think the most important thing is going to be transparency, but also on our end, showing, hey, this is how we arrived at this conclusion. We're not just coming up with conspiracy theories. But also, I think what you did, of course, at my behest, I take credit for all of Michael's successes, writing sort of an explainer, kind of showing why this fact check is just a matter of semantics, why it is obfuscating the heart of the matter.
Yes.
Because oftentimes these fact checks, and I've seen my share during my time here, oftentimes these fact checks become a matter of semantics, or they will, depending on what best serves the agenda, the leftist agenda, the fact check will either only focus on the letter, like to the exact letter of the issue, or it'll focus on the heart of the issue. In this case, they're clearly focusing on the letter of the law, and ignoring the heart of the issue. I've seen others where it's the reverse. But yeah, in this case, it's very clearly a matter of them nitpicking every little word to cover for Biden. And I think it's important for us at the Western Journal, like I said, the explainer you wrote is a great way to do it, but also for viewers and readers, seek out the truth. Don't just assume PolitiFact is correct. Don't just assume Facebook fact checkers care about facts. Look at different sources. Come to your own conclusion.
Yes.
And go off of that.
Yeah. To kind of go off of what you were saying a bit, and I completely agree. I think that we need to start to fight to make voices heard that really establish the difference between absolute truth and an opinion-based fact check. And I think that a lot of people, when they read sources like CNN or when they read sources like the New York Times, they assume that because this is a prominent news organization, this is the absolute truth. And I mean, of course, that can be further from the truth, but I think that we need to really make sure that we are uplifting people that will tell the absolute truth and that will make known, hey, this fact-checking service didn't get this right because of this, and this reason. And, that's kind of what you did in explaining the reason why the fact check was faulty. And I think that, personally, I really don't believe that fact-checking services do a whole lot. I think that they're a tool. I think they're a tool used by the left to say, this is why I'm right and this is why you're wrong. And I don't believe that we need that. I think it's just another avenue for leftist thought police to kind of take an agenda and run with it. But I do think that we need to help people who will call out the bias earn a more prominent place in mainstream news outlets. And obviously that's not going to really happen in CNN. But I think that we could help it happen. And I think that you guys are contributing to this by even watching this podcast, supporting journalistic organizations that are committed to finding the actual truth and that are committed to reporting that absolute and whole truth.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I've seen recently is there's a lot of conservatives saying that, okay, well, the way to fight back for us will be to just create our own fact-checking organizations. And to me, that kind of hits me as a bad idea, because the whole notion of why I think this is bad is because, any news outlet can do their own. All news is fact checking. That's what we all do. The difference with these fact checkers is it's these organizations like Facebook and Twitter that claim to be unbiased, that are just pretending to give these organizations this little extra nudge of moral authority that they shouldn't have for any reason whatsoever. They're just another biased news source with their own certain predilections and biases. So what do you guys think would be a good idea to have our own conservative type of fact-checking organizations, or would that just add to the noise?
Personally, I think that's a horrible idea. I mean, like what I said earlier, I really think that fact-check organizations are kind of a leftist invention. And I think that the reason why a lot of people kind of thrive off of fact checks is because they think that it makes them look good, and they think that it advances an agenda that they're trying to push out there. And I think that, honestly, I think we can do a lot better. I think that we can be committed to presenting the truth in a way that doesn't have to put down the other side in a sense, but just that makes people see what the actual issue is and why we believe that this is right or this is wrong based on actual facts.
Yeah.
So clearly you guys don't care about facts. That's duly noted.
It's exactly what we said.
I think the essence of a fact check is useful. It does serve a purpose. because there is misinformation out there. That is
Right.
Without a doubt, that is fact. Yeah. The problem happens. The problem arises when fact checks come with an agenda, and I don't know how we root that out per se. I don't know what the appropriate response is. I don't think having two competing ideological sets of fact checks, I don't think that solves anything.
Right.
So I do agree with you guys there. I'm not sure a conservative or right-leaning fact check group is the answer. If anything, I would almost... I mean, that's the problem. There are no centrist kind of news organizations.
Even if there were, they're biased towards the center. You know what I mean? So it's not like... And they're biased towards whatever predilections those individuals making those judgments and whoever's making the decisions at the top, there's going to be those biases there.
Yeah. I mean, so if we assume that to be fact, if we assume that, and you seem to be pretty sure of this.
Yeah.
If we are saying that there can be no unbiased reporting, then that really does come down to the reader. The reader is the one, or the reader, the viewer, the consumer of said news needs to be the one to make the ultimate decision.
Right.
Now, obviously, the pitfall there is the misinformation I mentioned earlier. But again, that comes down to the reader. If you hear something that you want to hear, don't just believe it's true.
Yeah.
Go dig into it. Do the effort, because trusting others to do that for you has led to this whole mess to begin with.
Yes.
But yeah.
Yeah, and that's a problem that we all need to be looking out for, because
we're all guilty of that.
We see plenty of this. Of course not you, Brian. Everyone else, we're saying. We've seen plenty of this like misinformation on the left, but we see it from right-wing sources all the time as well. So, yeah.
So, if you take away anything from this show, it's that Michael has bad music and sports takes, and Deborah just has bad music tastes.
And the Mavericks are really underperforming right now.
Anyways, guys, thank you.
Brian's gonna go cry. Sorry.
I might not go cry. I might go fire Michael after this.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for watching today. As you can see, we have a lot of fun here bringing you guys the truth. This is WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. You can catch us every weekday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. Don't miss a single one of these episodes. One way you can make sure you don't miss these is by going to westernjournal.com/newsletters. You can actually get the links delivered directly to your email. That way you'll know when they're coming. You don't have to rely on Facebook or YouTube or any other platform that might try to squelch the truth. If you are watching us on YouTube, you can also do us a huge favor. Follow WJ Live on your podcast network of choice, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, what have you. You can do us a huge favor there by leaving us a 5-star review. That would greatly help us out. And if you're already listening to us on audio, you can catch us on YouTube. You can go to youtube.com/WJ Live. Make sure you click the subscribe button. That way you can get all of our episodes. And the bell that Michael just tried to hit but failed, that will notify you when new episodes go live. So you definitely want to do that too. You want to make sure you don't miss a minute of this show. And finally, if you would like to support real journalism, which is as important as ever with these fact checkers running amok, you can do that by going to westernjournal.com/join. Subscribe to us there. You can actually help contribute directly to us, which would be a great help. Especially, Mike is going to need some help after I fire him after this episode. Thank you so much for watching us. We will catch you guys tomorrow. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Josh, did you hear? They're putting the Libertarian back on the podcast.
No.
Oh? You didn't see the calendar?
No.
You should talk to Kayla about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, who's on the show Tuesday?
You and Joe.
Yeah. Like he's back.
Yeah, no. You and Joe. You
The
should
libertarian?
Yeah, libertarian Joe.
He's not bad.
You should just go in the studio and check it out.
You're messing with me.
Okay.
Okay. Nice joke, Kayla. Got me to go to the studio. No!